He has allowed his program to be a forum for the unpopular, quote unquote. Not just once, but time and time again. I remember Barry's programs and Meir Kahane at least 15 years ago. Meir and Barry were miles apart when they began. They had nothing in common, save the survival of the state of Israel. Now this distance between them can be measured in yards. But never has there been less than mutual respect, even when they debated as adversaries. Barry, you have proved to be a true friend of Israel and a staunch supporter of Meir Kahane and the truth. Because you stand head above your peers, I would like to present you with this plaque. To Barry Farber, and unbridled anti-Israel hysteria, you stand out as a beacon and voice of sanity and support for your people and the Jewish state. Go in this thy might and save Israel. From Judges 6:14, the Kahane International Annual Dinner. Barry.
You scared me a minute ago. I thought you were getting up to leave. It occurred to me in an idle moment a few minutes ago that there are exactly, not approximately, I think exactly the number of seats on this dais that Meir Kahane would have had in the Knesset had he been allowed there. There was a Jewish boxer once upon a time named Slapsy Maxie Rosenblum. I never studied his win-loss record, but he must have lost a lot of them by knockouts because he walked into Lindy's right down the street here, and Bob Hope looked up from eating his cheesecake and said, "Hey, Slapsy, lie down on your back. Nobody recognizes you." I don't recognize myself when I'm supposed to accept a plaque and say a few words and sit down, because 99 speeches out of 100 of mine are raising money through Bonds of Israel for Israel. So forgive me if I slip and just repeat one thing that I tell every audience that I'm asking for money from to buy bonds for Israel. I tell them I'm not going to waive the real estate deed from the Bible. I'm not going to invoke the covenant. I'm not going to invoke the Holocaust. What can I add? Time is short. I say, out of respect for your intelligence, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Israel's unique, excruciating need. And I'll let them know I'm going to lay down one central theme and then fortify it with a few points and then sit down. That's all I can do. The rest is up to them. Now, the unifying central point is that we are talking not about bonds of Israel, Israeli industry, new waterways and drip irrigation, how much more we have to buy this year than last year to keep up with inflation. I say we're talking about all of the above. Make no mistake, we are talking about nothing less than Jewish survival. And in dramatic fashion, I want to switch the cameras away from Judea, Samaria, Gaza, the old city of Jerusalem, Hebron, the works. And I want to go to the people who gave me courtroom proof that we're talking about Jewish survival. I always thank them at the beginning of my fundraising remarks. I always thank, and this is solid proof that we're talking about Jewish survival. It's not vague. If there's a lawyer in this room And according to Jewish demographics, there ought to be at least one. You would go to trial with this. This is hard evidence. I say, I always thank the 57,000 people of my beautiful home state of North Carolina who went to the polls and voted for a Nazi for the office of State Attorney General. Now, I know, yes, I thank them. That's what we call in defense distant early warning. That's what we call in medicine discovering the lump in time. That is a gift. The Nazis have given us a gift alarm clock, and it's not even Hanukkah yet. Now, I'm going to skip. I'm just not going to take my ear's time to talk about the Ohio story, the Illinois story, the Wisconsin story, the Idaho stories, the 2 California stories, and the Florida story. But they are all stories of open anti-Semites, open, overt admirers of Adolf Hitler, running for office in American elections and scoring alarming totals at the polls. And I continue for about 15 minutes normally, simply grasshoppering from one evidence of neo-Nazi activity to another. The Holocaust revisionist movement, I finally learned how to do that in about 16 seconds. Let me just tell you what the Holocaust revisionists, it's not just one here and one there. They're organized. They're worldwide, even in Japan, believe it or not. And they are making a concerted effort to erase the Holocaust from the memory of man. Now, I don't want anybody else to get hurt, but if I exaggerate by one little grain, I want there to be lightning and thunder, and I want the Lord to take me on the spot and leave nothing but a crater under my feet and a purple smog where I once stood. I am not exaggerating. This is what the Holocaust revisionist movement is busy propagating around the world. They're not going to fool us, but there's a ready market for the following. Are you ready? Fasten your seatbelts. Adolf Hitler never had any intention of destroying the Jews, they said. It's a Jewish lie. 6 million were myth. Concentration camps? Well, what about the Jews who died? They say, oh yes, war is hell, Jews died, but everybody else died too. Jews died only in the proportion in which they existed there, in the mathematical proportion to the rest of the population. Poland, Czechoslovakia, it's a myth. No Holocaust. What about concentration camps? They admit there were concentration camps. To protect the Jew from the public wrath. Gas chambers? Oh, they're glad you asked that. Yes, there were gas chambers, because you see, they explain Jews for some reason have difficulty keeping lice out of their hair. Yeah, and so the gas chambers were a humanitarian German sanitation measure. And so on and on and on, and we haven't even gotten to the Intifada yet. We are talking about nothing less than Jewish survival. For a few minutes tonight, it's our turn. Now, when I accepted this honor, but by the way, Sheila, I listened very carefully to you, but no one in this room was more confused than I as to why I'm being honored. I had completely different remarks planned. But something happened between the time I was invited and accepted and right this minute. And it's very, very relevant to my ear's effort. It would be a nice, neat little package if I were to strip off my jacket and my tie and bare my shirt and my sackcloth, fall to bended knee and beg forgiveness for my previous Jewish liberal sins and embrace the entire package of Meir Kahane. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to do something very close. George Bush said, watch my lips. I grew up loving democracy. I still do. I haven't changed. I grew up with the dream that I was programmed to dream about our beloved Israel. I sometimes nickname it the Eleanor Roosevelt dream, and I don't mean to disparage that great lady, but she's just the first figure that leaps to mind. We wanted an Israel that would make Eleanor Roosevelt happy. Now, I almost hate to admit this in the light of what's happened in the past year, but here it is. The reason I argued with Meir Kahane for so many years on microphone was that I honestly believed in that Eleanor Roosevelt dream of a democratic Israel. I dreamed that if we were to take the Arab, educate the Arab, elevate the Arab, make the Arab prosperous, that we would one day find the Arabs in Israel and those in the new occupied territory saying to themselves, wait a minute, we are the freest Arabs in the world. We are the most prosperous Arabs in the world. We're not going to take orders from Yasser Arafat. We're going to make common cause with Israel. Now, I would not respect myself if I didn't once upon a time hold that dream. But I could not respect myself if I continued to hold it since last December. That dream started out weak and gradually tapered off. But it was worth 40 years to somebody who just loves the humanitarian image of Judaism. Now, where is our new dream? I say to the Jewish establishment, I say to the ones who are furious at me for it liking Meir Kahane, and it's obvious I like him and admire him on the whole. I say, where is that substitute dream, fellas, you've had since last December? Is the dream now land for peace? Look at the land. Look at the peace. Did you see this very day Yasser Arafat's smile like the front end of a Japanese bulldozer? Cheers as they are now going through the motions of approving Resolution 242 or 424. I was never good at math. They're going through all that business, and the liberals of the world are going to get sucked right up the exhaust pipe. Do you think? I quote Meir Kahane a lot. Let me quote Sidney Zion, a great journalist, who said, if we trade land for peace, if there is a Palestinian state, how long do you think Yasser Arafat and his fellows are going to be content to run the post office in Nablus? No. The dream, and I say to the Jewish establishment, fellas, you owe me a new dream. Because if you don't give me a new dream with a lot of teeth in it and a lot of solidity through it and a good foundation under it, you're going to lose me to Meir Kahane all the way. If you had asked me a year ago, Barry, what are chances that Meir Kahane will be barred from the next Israeli election, I'd have said 0. I predicted Bush's win when he was 17 points behind, so I'm not that dumb. But let me tell you how dumb I am. I would have said a year ago that the chances were 0. Israel wouldn't dare commit anything as blatantly undemocratic as that. They would lose the support of the American Jewish community if they were to abrogate democracy by banning the Koch Party. Well, the thunderclap that I expected from the American Jewish community is not even a butterfly's belch. It is non-existent, and I, for one, must make my voice a little bit louder because I can no longer, for a while I said to myself, am I a freak? Here, a democracy, isn't there something? Here, I say what I've said over the air for the past 20 years about Meir Kahane, and he honors me and invites me to speak. And Israel, which prides itself on being a democracy, won't even let him run. I said to myself, am I a freak that I feel this way? And then I said to myself, no, I'm just not a hypocrite, and therefore I feel like a freak. I can no longer brook the hypocrisy and the cowardice of the American Jewish establishment. I'm overkilled. I want to close on a proverb. I want to close on a proverb. It is a Yiddish proverb. Where I come from in North Carolina, it was considered impolite to study Hebrew because the rabbi would think you were just checking up on him. Our congregation was so small, there wasn't even a rift between the rabbi and the president of the temple. City. I was about 20 miles south of New York on the Jersey Turnpike, and I was playing with the radio. And all of a sudden, I'm glad I was a younger man with a good grip on the wheel, because all of a sudden, out of that car radio, I heard a loud voice booming, "Geh to the nearest department store and kaufe erstige Klasses Wasche Dreier combination." I thought I was having an out-of-body experience. I didn't know you were allowed to talk Yiddish over the radio. Then when you're a Westinghouse, come to our go play some discount. That was WEVD. Now, they've had to change their programming. It's no longer 100% Yiddish. They've had to have Spanish programs, Italian, Haitian, Creole, Greek, 3 factions of Albanians, 4 dialects. But if you know when to tune in WEVD, you can still hear the one and only original Shlomo Ben Israel giving it to him. Geh to the Nachbarhof grocery store and them a 1 pound frozen package from Mr. Weinberg's kosher chocolate liver. Cane aggravation. And them a voice from freezer compartment and defrosted. I knew that Yiddish was going to be the international language, not just for us, but for all. It became apparent to me in 1960, a newscast on WEVD. It was late in 1960. It was not an important news day. The newscast began, "Unser neues Satellite ist schon georbiten und alles ist okay." A Montana cowboy is injured geworden, the rodeo. 7 boobies in Brooklyn haben geentert seine ähnlichen Elvis Presley lookalike contest. And the President Eisenhower is geworden in North Carolina shooting quail. Hebrew cannot do that. Aramaic cannot do that. Only Yiddish, so I like to close on a Yiddish proverb that goes, "A Bard mit a Bard können sich nicht zusammenkommen, aber a Mensch mit a Mensch kann." And what that means is mountains cannot be moved closer together, but Menschen can. This Mensch here is simply, he has difficulty because he is so toweringly more important to Jewish survival than the overwhelming majority of his critics. My metamorphosis, as Sheila so astutely pointed out, from being an outright, facing Meir Kahane on the ramparts with a broken bourbon bottle. If I continue at this pace, you will find me in some place like Rishon LeZion ringing doorbells.
Who's the National Director of TOP. Jill Levy, our Kahane Secretary. And the woman we always forget, the woman behind the man, Libby Kahane. I also would like to thank my co-chairman, Sheila Liz, who's been a team for a long time, and each year it gets better. Sheila, would you come up here, please? Unfortunately, Mickey, Sheila's husband, left town this morning on business. This is the first time he's ever missed the dinner, and he took an interesting evening to miss it. I have here a plaque, and it reads, "My deepest appreciation to Mickey and Sheila Liz
for your uncommon loyalty and devotion to our Jewish people. B'Ahavat Israel, Rabbi Meir Kahane. And it is long overdue.
First time in my life I'm speechless. My working with Meir Kahane for 20 years and for the Jewish people, needless to say, is a labor of love. We all have a tremendous stake involved. It is survival. And let's not forget that. There is a cancer, and it is growing. And the cancer is called the Arab population. We all have a stake in this. I'm thrilled with this, but I'm just one of many people that are working. Mayor, thank you, and thank everyone.
We had hoped that this dinner would celebrate a Kaf victory at the polls, but regretfully, it does not. As the world knows, the Supreme Court of Israel rendered a so-called democratic judgment that Rabbi Kahane's movement is beyond the pale of democracy. In doing so, however, they vindicated everything that he's been saying, which is indeed a victory. The Arab threat from without and the confusion within, compounded by the increasing decadence and economic chaos, raise the specter of the disintegration of the dream of 2,000 years. Amidst all of this, there are many who offer a solution. The Elections Committee in the Supreme Court, which represents the entrenched, truly undemocratic rulers of Israel, consider Rabbi Kahane's views to be outside the bounds of democracy. The substance of their decision, and the opposition to him in general, is that how can he alone know the answers to Israel's problems? A reference to a previous time of chaos in Jewish history would be in order. In the Megillah, we read of the promulgation of Haman's plan to exterminate the Jewish people. At this point, we are told, and I quote, "The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was bewildered." Then the Megillah continues, "But Mordecai understood all that had transpired, and he rent his garments and put on sackcloth with ashes. He went out into the city and cried loudly and bitterly. He came until the front of the king's gate, for it was forbidden to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. Of course, there were many people who knew what was taking place, but Mordecai understood the events." What the Megillah is conveying to us is that often in Jewish history, there is one person who has divinely inspired insight into what is taking place, while the Jewish people at large, and even their sages, are bewildered. We are fortunate to have with us an individual who does understand all that has transpired, and he is crying loudly and bitterly. As he has noted many times, if we don't understand everything, we understand nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and my privilege to present to you the exponent par excellence of the authentic Jewish idea, and with God's help and our help, the future Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Rabbi Meir Kahane.
Years ago, Prophet Isaiah stood in Jerusalem and he spoke the words, "For it is a rebellious people, children that desire not to hear the law of the Lord, who say to the seers, 'See not,' and to the visionaries, 'Envision not unto us true things. Speak unto us smooth things, envision delusion.'" Nothing has changed in 2,500 years. A Jewish leader of any kind is a tzofeh, a visionary. He sees. One need not be divinely inspired. One who can see that which others do not see is only one who sees what others see, but is willing to admit it, and is not afraid to see that which he sees. He has no greater powers than anyone else. He sees what everyone else sees, and is prepared to state, there it is, the bitter truth. That is the tzofeh, the visionary, that every Jewish leader must be. That is the tzofeh, the visionary, of whom the prophet Amos says, San'u bash'al mochiach. They hate the rebuker in the gates. Speak unto us smooth things. Give us delusions. Do not speak unto us painful truths. It is the role of every tzofeh, of every Jewish leader, to choose to be pelted with stones rather than with dollars, and to speak the truth if he loves the Jewish people. For 2,000 years, we Jews had a vision. No matter where the Jew lived, in the Galut, in the exile, he had the same vision, the same dream, whether he lived in Poland, or Morocco, or in Yemen, or in Russia. The Jew in the exile, in the fear of the exile, humiliation of the exile, the suffering of the exile, they all dreamed the same dream, and it was called the dream of Shivat Zion, the return to Zion. Someday, they dreamed, someday we will return. Someday we too will have a state of our own. Someday we will leave the fear, the humiliation, the terror. Someday, in our state, we will be free. With the help of God, we have a state today. Through the mercy of the Almighty and the sacrifice of the Jewish people, there is a state today. And the dream is realized. Is it realized? There is no fear. In Yerushalayim, Jews are afraid to walk to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, through Sha'ar Shechem, Damascus Gate. They're afraid to walk through the Muslim quarter. This is the dream. Jews are afraid to go to the graves of their parents on the Mount of Olives, Har HaZeitim, because the Arabs in the adjoining town of Silwan attack them regularly. This is the dream. In the Galilee, the army builds access roads around Arab villages, Israeli Arab villages, so that Jews need not ride through the Arab village at night. This is the dream. An intifada of 11 months of an intifada. 11 months that the army of Israel can't put down women and children in Gaza, in Qalqilia, in Jenin? Of course they can. And of course the frustrated soldier wants to. They take a soldier, give him a gun, send him to Gaza, and there he is told, you can't use the gun. They insult you, humiliate you with the vilest of language. They spit upon you. If they attack you with stones, cannot use the gun. I know the standing orders. I served in the Israeli army. The orders are clear. If you're attacked by stone throwers, only if there is an imminent danger to life, then you may shoot in the air and warn them in Arabic to stand back. Then, if you're still alive, you may shoot at one of the rioters in one leg. And then, if you are still alive, you can shoot freely. Is it any wonder that Jordan television shows over and over again the same NBC film clip of Israeli soldiers running away from stone throwers? They're not afraid of the stone throwers. They're afraid of the choice that they have to make. Stand there and possibly be hit in the head with the stone, or shoot and perhaps be tried before a military court. This is the dream. Soldiers are frustrated, bitter, and frightened. The Arabs are not afraid. Children are no longer afraid of the border police, before whom they once trembled. This is the dream that we once had. If a Jewish youngster is late in coming home by an hour, by 2 hours, panic breaks out. Where is he? Eifu, Makaralo, Ulai Miyodei Hashem Aravim. Where is he? What happened to him? Who knows? Perhaps Arabs. That's how we live. This is the dream. For this we waited 2,000 years. A mother rides with 3 children in a bus in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, the liberated territories. Within minutes, she and her 3 children are dead, burned alive. This is what we came home for. To be free of the pogroms of Kishinev, so that there should be a pogrom in Jericho. It's a country that tragically is falling apart. It's a country that sees the ultimate danger. The ultimate danger is not rocks or fire bombs. They certainly will not overthrow Israel with rocks and fire bombs. The ultimate danger is demography. The Arab birth rate is 4 times that of the Jews. The Arabs have babies and we abortions. They have babies and we pay them for the babies. Every Arab child born, a check to the parents each month until the child is 18. Bituach Leumi, national insurance. We not know. What people subsidizes its own suicide. The Arab company says, Hamsha Yeladim, 5 children. Hamsha, Kachimsha check. Take 5 checks. Asha, 10, Kachasara check. Take 10 checks. 20 children, take a book of checks. Last year there was an article. Dafka, a sympathetic one. A Bedouin Arab, an Israeli Bedouin, in the Bedouin town of Rabbi, in the Negev. Father of 48 children, 6 wives, 48 children. King Yehu. V'hem Yehu. May they increase. They will increase. Every month he goes to the post office in Beersheba to collect 48 checks and laughs all the way home. One is looking for a doctoral dissertation in abnormal psychology. Here it is. Not a laughing matter. There's a weeping for generations. The occupied territories, Shimon Peres faces entire campaign upon warning that if we do not give up what he calls the occupied lands, then we will face a danger to the Jewishness of Israel. What about the Galilee? The Galilee today has a majority of Arabs. Northern Israel is 54% Arabs. We are losing northern Israel. If you travel from Akko on the coast, Tzfat, except for Carmel, there are no Jews. You're in Palestine. You want to see Palestine? Go to Akko, where no Jew dares walk in the old city at night, and where no Arab fears to walk in the Jewish section at night. A city which in 1949 had 1,000 Arabs, and which today is well over 1/3 Arab. The Jews are fleeing, the Arabs are growing, and it is the same in Yaffo, in Jaffa, and in Ramleh, and in Lod, Lida. The idea is that most Jews only see the airport at Lida. Try visiting Lida once. The neighborhoods there, the Arab sections. And you see cities that are 1/3 Arab already, 25% Arab already. What is going to be? What is going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? What is going to be if the Arabs will tomorrow proclaim that they are becoming apostles of nonviolence? And they become saints. And every night they make love, not war. How many Arabs will Arab citizens? How many Arab citizens will there be in Israel, the Jewish state? And how many will sit in the Knesset? This is the problem, and we sit and we avoid it like the plague because the implications are too horrible. So when visionaries and Jews, when a Jewish leader rises and he cries out the bitter truth that there is a contradiction, at least in Israel, between a Jewish state and Western democracy. Israel was not founded as this country was. This country was founded as a democracy. Irrelevant whether you were Jew or Catholic or Protestant. That's how this country was founded. But the state of Israel was not founded in that way. It was founded, and for a good reason, as the Jewish state. Because for 2,000 years, we had no state. And we enjoyed such minority benefits as crusades and inquisitions and pogroms and Auschwitzes. So we decided that we could do without those benefits. And we decided that we would have a state of our own. A Jewish state. That's what Zionism is about. It is the creation of a Jewish state which we control, whose destiny we decide. A ship of which we will be its captain. A Jewish faith which we will be the master of. That's what a Jewish state is. It is the experience of 2,000 years of not having a state. And a determination that it will always be Jewish no matter what. That is what a Jewish state means. Is there a contradiction between that and Western democracy? Of course there is. My 8-year-old grandchild knows that. My 73-year-old prime minister apparently is not capable of grasping it. Of course there is a contradiction. And why should we be ashamed of it? Why are we ashamed of saying, having lived under all the peoples, we don't trust them anymore? I don't trust you, world. I want my state. What is wrong with that? What is there in the psyche of the Jew that compels him to hone guilt to a fine art? No one can feel as guilty as the Jew. He has mastered it. He feels guilty about everything, whether he did it or did not do it. He feels guilty about wanting to live, having died for 2,000 years. The Jew finds it uncomfortable to live. He almost enjoys being a loser, because losers get sympathy. Well, I would rather be a winner any time, and I think so. I'm not interested. Love cares about whether the world loves me or doesn't love me. The Jew is obsessed with being loved. If the Gentile doesn't love him, he may kill him. Because he doesn't understand the Gentile. The decent Gentile doesn't like people that want to be loved. He's willing to respect people. And I want respect, and you only get that by having self-respect. And so, we play games with the Arabs. We want to believe that the Arab is grateful to us. How many times have you heard at a fundraising breakfast, or brunch, or lunch, or dinner, or supper, whichever way the Jew raises his money to eat? How many times have you heard a cabinet minister, a Jewish leader, get up and say, we found the desert and turned it into a garden? Write a check. And Jews so want to hear that. We found the desert and we turned it into a garden. Pity is that we never listen to what the Arab says when he hears that. The Arab says, that's quite true. You took a desert and you turned it into a garden. But it was my desert. Now it's your garden. That's what the Arab believes. How many times have you heard the concept, the Israeli Arabs should be grateful, they live better than the Arabs in Iraq? The tragedy of people that don't understand that people would rather be poor and free in their own country than better off in a land that belongs to someone else. The Bible said it a long time ago, Lo alechem livado yichyah adam. Not by bread alone shall man live. So we speak of all the nonsense, what we've done to the Arabs. I remember in the Knesset, a debate on the education bill, and Shimon Peres was speaking, and he said, 40 years ago, there were 110,000 Arabs in Israel, illiterate. Today, and he stepped back and fairly beamed, he glowed, as he said, and today, 4,000 Arabs study in the universities of Israel. And I thought to myself, one of us is insane. One of us is insane. 4,000 Arabs studying the University of Israel. A Glickenstadt. What joy! Do you know who the most dangerous Arabs of Israel are? Of course, the students at the universities. The revolution never came from the numb and the dumb. The revolution only comes from the intellectuals who then incite the numb and the dumb. We are training with full scholarships thousands of the future leaders of the PLO because we are not normal. It's not only Paris and his parasites. It's all of them. It's all of them. It's all of them. It's all of the people that are too terrified to admit the truth that you cannot have Jewish democracy. Abba Eben comes to this country and for $15,000 a lecture babbles in 12 languages at the same time about Jewish democracy. What a nonsensical concept is Jewish democracy. There's no such thing as Jewish democracy. There's either democracy or there's no democracy. Jewish democracy, Arab democracy, Chinese democracy. You want democracy? Say democracy. And whoever's the majority will be the majority. And please be honest, even if you're a fugitive from Cambridge. The lack of honesty, the refusal to be honest, because to be honest would be to admit that their entire lives were lies, were delusions. Of course they cannot cope with it. And of course they must ban the person who raises that most terrible of all questions. Do the Arabs have a right to sit peacefully and non-violently and become the majority and vote Israel out of existence? Yes or no? They can't answer that question. If they say yes, then they're anti-Zionists. If they say no, then they're Meir Kahane. And so, unable to answer the question, terrified of the question, which goes to the very heart of their delusions and their fraud. They do the only thing that they can do. Unable to answer the question, they ban the one who questions. And now they assume, now there is no more problem, now there is no more question. Of course the question is there. And as the Arabs grow and grow both in quantity and in quality, the question will be a frightening one. The Intifada will enter our streets and our homes. Today, in Jerusalem, Jews live in certain neighborhoods. Neve Yaakov is one. Jews who ride on bus 25. As soon as they reach a certain point, Sharafat, they automatically tend to lower their heads, expecting the rocks and expecting the firebombs. The Intifada is not in Gaza, it is in Jerusalem. It's in Jaffa. It's in Tel Aviv. It's in Haifa. It's the woman who was driving last week on the coastal road near Herzliya, who was hit in the head and is in critical condition. At the funeral of the mother and the 3 children that were burned alive, one of the cabinet ministers repeated that which is repeated ad nauseum at every funeral. The murderers will pay, he said. The question is, does he know who the murderers really are? He thinks the murderers were the Arabs who threw the firearms. Let me tell you something. In the Torah there is a halakha, there is a law, that if one finds the body of a Jew murdered in a field, and we do not know who the murderer is, we have to measure to the nearest town or city. And the elders of that town, the rabbis, the scholars, the elders, must come out to the body and declare, Yadeinu lo shafchu et hadam hazeh. Our hands did not have a share in the shedding of this blood. And the rabbis ask, does anyone suspect that they did have a share in this? Why must they make a declaration that we had no share? No one suspects them of it. And they answer, the declaration means we did everything in our power to ensure that the conditions would be such that he would not be murdered. The government of Israel make that statement, Yadeinu lo shafchu et hadam hazeh. Our hands did not have a share in the shedding of that blood. Every Jewish humanist, ethicist, moralist, who babbles about throw the Arabs out, that's terrible. That's obscene. That's racist. Everyone who said that and therefore kept the Arabs in the country and allowed them to murder Jews, every one of those people has a share in the shedding of that blood. I am not a racist. I'm not a Nazi. What an obscenity it is for a Jew to dare to call another Jew a Nazi. That the High Court of Israel, and was there ever a lower High Court, that the High Court of Israel dared to accept the prosecution's arguments that my laws were similar to those of Nuremberg. It's an outrage to compare the situation of the Jews in Germany to that of the Arabs in Israel. What an obscenity. Did the Jews in Germany run around crying, this is our country, it was stolen from us by the Germans, and someday when we have the power, we will take it back and call it Israel. Is that what the Jews of Germany did? And did they then throw firebombs at the Germans and stone them? The Jews of Germany wanted nothing more than to be the best Germans who ever lived. The Arabs of Israel don't want to be the best Jews who ever lived. Israelis who ever lived. They don't want to be Jews. They don't want to be Israelis. They are Palestinians. And they want to Palestine. And they kill us. And I want to throw them out. Because I hate them? No. Because I love Jews. And that's not easy. I wish the Arabs well elsewhere. Is what I say worse than what is happening now? An intifada in which over 300 Arabs were killed? Every day they kill 1, 2, 6. Is that better than what I would have done? If I had been the Prime Minister, not one Arab would have been killed because they wouldn't have been there. Within 2 weeks, they wouldn't have been there. The screaming would have stopped. This way, every day and every night, and editorials and the attacks, and it is only beginning, because what will happen when the Intifada spreads to the Galilee? And every night on television, you'll see Jews killing Arabs and Arabs killing Jews inside Israel. I don't want anyone killed. I want separation. I want separation. If I have the same contempt for Arabs that liberal Jews have, I would play the same game. Jews who have no national pride cannot understand Arabs who do. I understand Arabs because I have national pride. I understand the Arabs, and they understand me, and neither of us can begin to understand Jews. I've said it 100 times, it's worth saying it another 1,000 times. Is there one person in this room who has such contempt for Arabs that he believes that there is one Arab who enjoys living in a country called the Jewish state? How many in this room would enjoy living in Jerry Falwell's Christian state? That's right, that's exactly how many Arabs would like living in the Jewish state. The Arab stands up to sing his national anthem, Hatikva. Shoulders are thrust back, his chest out, pride courses through his veins as he sings the words, Nefesh Yehudi Homiya, the soul of a Jew yearns. How it speaks to him. How meaningful. And when he concludes with the words, Hatikva bat shnot alpayim, the hope of 2,000 years, tears stream down his cheeks as he thinks to himself, how my Savior waited 2,000 years for the Jews to come home. Every Tisha B'Av, the Arabs would go to the Wailing Wall and wail, when are the Jews coming home? Hatikva means the hope. It was our hope. It was their nightmare. Because I respect Arabs, that's why I want to throw them out. Because I know that you can't buy them, that's why I want them out of my country. There are 22 countries, God bless them all. I don't have 22 countries. The Jewish people doesn't have 2 countries. It has one. And that one country is ours, all of it. And on that there is never debase yourself in debating it whether that country is ours. Of course it's ours. They did not ban me because of racism. Yitzhak Shamir has never lost sleep over racism. They banned me because every poll showed me with at least 10 seats. And in Meir, the week that I was banned, 3 polls were given. The 3 leading polls. One showed me with 7 seats, one with 10 seats, and one with 15 seats. That's why I was banned. Not only by the left, but by the right. And a cheap political decision that would have brought smiles to men such as Mayors Curley and Daley. Nothing has changed. When we were banned, we achieved a victory that is monumental. Let me tell you why. The Jewish people believes that the Almighty tests us. Every Jew is tested. Especially winners. God doesn't usually test losers, doesn't he? He tests winners to see if they are really deserving of it. From the time of the first Jew, Abraham, who was tested 10 times, a Jew was tested. And we were tested to see if faced with being banned and able to escape the ban by changing our platform, by rising before the court and saying, we are prepared not to say this, and not to do this, and not to... We could have been spared being banned. We stood firm. We never changed a word and never will change it. It was our victory, and it was a tragic loss for the Jewish people. It was because we stand at the crossroads. An historic era, the final chapter for the Jewish people. And there must be Jewish leaders, and there must be a Jewish government that will cry out the truth and have the power to change things and to make the Jewish people what they should be. And that was taken away from us now, but it has not ended. We understand what happened. What happened was that a party named Kahane was banned. And so, a party named Koach has now been formed. And we will follow to the letter of the law, the spirit of it, exactly what the anti-racist bill says. That no one who quotes from a religious book shall be deemed to be racist. That's what the anti-racist law says. That is the exclusion. Every piece of literature that we print will be tailor-made to that law. We will print nothing but quotations from the Torah and the Talmud. And I want to tell you that I have some beauties of quotations that will make their hair stand on end. They feared us, most especially because of the youngsters. How the youngsters loved us. But a pity that all of you could not have been at our rallies. We have rallies not beginning now in 1988 for the campaign. We began our rallies in 1984 after we won the seat in Knesset. We began running the next night, 2 rallies a night. We knew that we were banned by Israel Radio and TV. A Knesset member, 4 years I didn't appear on one program on Israel Radio and TV. And I must say at this point, I find this a personal joy and pleasure and honor to say that in this country, that could not happen. And I hope that everyone here realizes who Barry Farber is. I couldn't care less if he agrees with me or disagrees with me. He is a man who opened his program to me because it was fair. Is what we have to learn in Israel. The concept of fair play. The concept of disagreeing without thinking that I disagree, therefore he's my enemy. The youngsters of Israel at the rallies, the 15-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, the ones that will be voting in the next election. That's what terrified the political parties, because all the polls showed me with over 50% of their votes. At the rallies, these were youngsters who never saw Begin. They never heard Begin. They didn't know Begin. They only knew one thing, Kahane, Kahane, Kahane. That's what they the Sephardic Jews who poured out. Why do they support me? Because they're normal. They didn't study about Arabs at some B'nai B'rith seminar. They live with Arabs. They know what Arabs are. They fled the Arabs. The liberal lives in a world he would like it to be. Street people live in the world as it is. They are normal. Of course, that's why when I would speak, they would say, "Utzodek, he's right," because I said what they thought. And for decades, they were taught, "You don't say that, that isn't right." And suddenly, someone came and said, "Of course you say it, because it's the truth." Racism? The left dares call me a racist. As if tomorrow morning an Arab would sincerely convert by halakha, I would not accept him as a Jew? As if the Kach movement doesn't have converted Arabs as members in it. Of course it does. There is no racial difference. There is a religious difference. Not a racial one, God forbid. Please God, I don't know what will be with this new government, if there will be one. What kind of a government there will be is irrelevant. It is irrelevant. In our government, the government of national unity, irrelevant. Neither one has the answers. Unless one is prepared to get up and speak the truth of the contradiction between Western democracy and Zionism, then one has no answer. And they're not prepared to speak the truth, including Moledet, the party of General Zevin, who speaks of voluntary transfer. Of course, why didn't I think of that? Of course, every Arab war, of course. Are you willing to leave? Of course I'm willing to. Of course I'm willing to. Voluntary transfer. Why didn't I think of that? And he speaks only of the Arabs of the liberated lands. He doesn't speak of the Israeli Arabs. But they are the greater danger. The Arab in Gaza doesn't vote. He's not a citizen. But the Arab of Jaffa does vote. And he is a citizen. And he sits in the Knesset. And we have in the Knesset Tufik Tubi, Tufik Ziyad, and how many Tufiks will there be in 10 years? And that's the question that people are terrified to think about. Thank God we are at the peak today. If you knew the love of the people for the God, you have no idea. Don't read the New York Times or Newsday or the Washington Post or all those other insipid papers. They will not decide the fate of Israel. I was in Berkeley Monday, election eve, and everybody was in hysteria over the fact that there was a proposition G or Y or X, whatever it is, to twin Berkeley with the refugee camp in Gaza. It was, and the Jews were upset and hysterical. And a reporter from the Chronicle asked me, "What do you think?" And I said, "Who cares what you ask in Berkeley? We'll decide our fate in Israel." I want only one thing of you, to be Jews of faith. Don't be despondent. People say to me, "But what is going to be now? What is going to be now?" We continue the same rally, the same reaching of people. Of course we continue. election, which may very well not be in 4 years, or 3 years, or 2 years even, the party will of course run. And this time we're not speaking of 10 seats or 15 seats. This time a whole generation of youngsters is growing up. It's 30 seats. The Jewish people always thinks in terms of eternity, not in short-range terms. What is a loser in Judaism is very, very different from what is a loser in world terms. Let me finish with an example of losers and winners. More than 1900 years ago, the Romans destroyed the second Jewish state, burned the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, drove the Jewish people into exile. And the Roman Emperor Titus returned to Rome in triumph, taking with him the captives. And he built an arch, which stands to this day. In Rome, the Arch of Titus, engraved on it figurines of the Jewish slaves being led into exile, into captivity, and he minted coins with the words Judea capta. Judea is captured, they finished. And as the hundreds of thousands of Romans stood in the streets of ancient Rome watching this victorious Roman parade, and the poor Jewish slaves being dragged away into exile, and knowing that the Roman Empire stretched from Brittany in the west to Parthia in the east, and that the Jewish state was gone, what would one have said to anyone who would have risen and proclaimed, someday this empire will be no more, and someday the descendants of these people will have their own state? What would they have said? In 1943, the British Eighth Army captured Rome, and they marched in a victory parade down the main boulevard. And part of the British Eighth Army was a brigade, known as the Jewish Brigade, made up of soldiers from Eretz Israel. And as they marched past the Arch of Titus, they paused, and they painted on the base of the arch in red paint the words, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel still live. We were not defeated, we stumbled. A temporary setback, but we continue. With faith in God and the strong Jewish arm, we will bring the final redemption.
Ladies and gentlemen, if any one of you envies me at this point, I'll very happily change places. You can come up here, and I will go down there. Following two orations, one by Barry Farber and the other by our next or future Prime Minister, reminds me of the the Swedish ambassador, who attended a banquet in honor of Elie Wiesel. And when he was called out to speak, following again an array of speakers, he rose and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the brain is a marvelous thing. From the moment a child is born, that brain starts to work and work and work until he gets up to deliver a talk. Then it stops working." I would like to describe to you for a minute. Came 12,000 miles round trip. I was told I have 2 minutes. It took me longer to put my baggage on the upper lift. On October the 18th, when at 5 minutes after 9, the judges came out with their unanimous decision, as though they had not decided weeks ago what their decision would be. The weather in Israel changed. It had been sunny right up to that day, and that day the clouds appeared. The people who walked in the streets were dismayed, frightened, frustrated, angry. I'm not talking about people who are going to vote for Kahane. I'm talking about the average Israeli who thought this was the greatest and the blackest day in the history of Israel. And then there was a victory that the Arabs had. They sent in a car which exploded, and 8 of our soldiers were killed. But we in Israel don't count numbers. We say Chaim was killed at age 18. Moshe was killed, the father of 4 children. And everyone has a name, and we Jews know that they went to a funeral, that they're going to sit Shiva, that they're going to say Kaddish, that they will mourn for 11 months, if not for the rest of their lives. I was at one of the funerals where the father and mother wanted to jump into the grave with their son who had just gone into the army 1 week before. That was their celebration. I heard all this applause for my good friend, Rabbi Kahane, and I've been with him maybe for 25 years, way back to the first meeting of the Jewish Defense League. And I tell you that if he was running for prime minister in this auditorium, he would be elected. No doubt about it. But unfortunately, he's not running for office here. He's running for office in Israel, not here. And all your applause, and all your standing up, and all your cheering, and I stood up too, and I cheered also, won't get him 1 vote. Unless you have children there and you say you should vote for Kahane, otherwise I'll write you off in my will. 2,000 years ago, you hear? The Jews had a prayer, they had a hope, and they had a dream. They had a prayer that someday the Holy Land will be returned to them. They had a prayer that they would be able to walk through the streets in safety. And they had a hope that they could bring up their children in the Holy Land. We have that prayer. We have that dream. We have that hope now in Israel. And no one, and I tell you, no one, no enemy from within and no enemy from without, no Arafat, no Arabs, no Peres, no Shamir will dare to take this hope, this dream, this wish away from us. I closed my office in Israel. I have a busy office. too ill to travel, to come here to see what I can do to help my good friend, to help the friend of the Jews, to help the one man who has the courage to be in the minority and someday to win over the majority. Let me tell you how this can be done. It can't be done with applause. A speaker likes to be applauded. It feeds his ego. Why not? It can only be done with money. I want you to know that when he went to the Supreme Court, his lawyer did not take green stamps as his salary or as his payment, but money. I'd like you to know that every month there is a $25,000 expense. I want you to know, as he said, since he's not allowed on the radio, he's not allowed on television, he's never made a speech in any high school or public school, though he won a case where he was supposed to be allowed, then the only way he can, his ideas and his program and his philosophy and his strength for Judaism can be communicated to the people in Israel is with money. It takes money to do it. Monahan spent $2 million to become a senator. But you know, in Israel the cost is even more. I asked you, those who you applauded, and I watched. I watched the whole auditorium. It's an occupational disease with me. And I watched how you stood up in admiration and in approval of what he said. Now I ask you to use the same two hands in which you applauded, put it in your pocket, and show me the enthusiasm behind the applause. Show me the sincerity and the honesty behind the applause. I'll tell you what I want from this group, $150,000. We can get it. It takes a minute of bravery on your part. You know, they say that the man who shovels money out to good causes, God shovels it back. And God's shovel is much larger than your shovel. My dear friends, if you're going to talk now, then talk in dollars. And I ask you, each one of you, at every table, to become a sort of a chairman at that table. And see to it that you really will stand up and be counted. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the first donation. I hope someone is writing these donations down so we can have a count up to $150,000. The first one I have is from Mr. Goldman, $5,000. All we need now is $140,000. You have your name card. Please don't leave now. It would be totally unfair. It would be like casting a negative ballot. You will have guilt feelings as Rabbi Kahane described. There you have your seating cards. If you don't have money with you, and which Jew travels without it, then you can write your donation on that card.
Or we have blanks.
Or you have blanks. Great, but let's bring it up here and let's keep it going.